Good morning. It's Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. We're in the commissioner chambers here at the courthouse. We got a full slate of commissioners, the county administrator, and the clerk of the board. So at this time, I'll call the meeting to order, and if you'd please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, with that, first order of business here is the approval of vouchers.
We have one voucher this morning. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $260,086.06. As presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next is our approval of the consent agenda. I believe there's 3 items on the consent agenda.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 3.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda items 1 through 3. With no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. With that, we'll move down to the commissioner administrator updates. Mr. Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of the work I've been working on last week has been routine administration matters, but there are some highlights of things that I know you're interested in. We are continuing work on the Bi-County Police Information Network, or BIPIN, upgrade. That is progressing. It's still a little bit behind schedule, but we've got a dedicated team from the vendor that's helping us work through some of those challenges there, and I think we're fine in that regard. Doing some work on strategic planning for BCES and CCOM, and planning for the Juvenile Justice Center new construction that will be taking place over the next couple of years. Also working on our application for the second tranche of our ARPA funding. It'll be $9.5 million that we should expect to receive within the next 30 days. And yesterday I was able to participate in a briefing from members of the city of Pasco and their consultants regarding their plans for the Broadmoor development area. We anticipate that we'll continue that conversation with each individual commissioner so that you have a good idea of what the city's plans are there and can ask questions regarding what they're doing. And last night I was able to participate in the Pasco City Council meeting with Tom French from the Hapo Center to talk about our energy audit and our needs of improving some of those systems and HVAC issues that we're having out there. And got some good feedback from the City Council, and that discussion is going to continue.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Peck.
A little lighter than usual week this week, but I did participate in the Grace Clinic 20th anniversary get-together last week. There would really probably no reason that my fellow commissioners would know, but prior to your time on the board, the county, together with Benton County, facilitated a one-of-a-kind contract in the state of Washington where the Grace Clinic, which is a free clinic for medical, dental, therapeutic services, is provided to people who don't have insurance. Anyway, it's an interesting arrangement in that under a state approved contract, when the clinic provides services, each service has a state authorized value assigned to it, and they collect records of all the services they provided. They add up the value of those services, and they use that to pay their rent to the health department that actually owns the building. And over their 20 years, partly in a previous location, but most of it where they are now, they've amassed more than enough credits each month to pay for the rent, but also to accumulate enough additional value that they can probably buy the building with it. The reason that this is significant is, one, it's the only one of its kind in the state. Mr. Bob Johnson and Mark Brault and myself put this together years ago. We're trying to expand Grace Clinic operations, and again, they provide free medical, dental, and counseling services to people. I bring it up not to applaud the work of it, but more to point out that it's a great illustration of how when the counties and people get together, there are creative solutions that can provide a lot of these services at no additional cost to the public and without additional taxes. Not saying that the tax approach isn't valuable too, but I just think it's an interesting and, like I've said, a one-of-a-kind model. So we had a few different meetings, discussions on that recently. Board of Health, I've been meeting with staff and with Jason over the 1152, which is the state statute that requires us to expand the health board, and meetings with the Wasatch Legislative Steering Committee group, of which I'm one of the co-chairs for the state. That's it for this week. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
Had the Ben Franklin Transit Planning and Marketing meeting, also the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, and the Southeast Washington Aging and Long-Term Care Council of Governments. Out of that came there's vouchers available for Older Americans Nutrition Program that can be found at Senior Life Resources. It's a voucher for the farmers market. Also had the WASAC meeting and Columbia River Training Program in Ephrata. Discussed the history of the Columbia Basin Project. Originally there was 1,020,000 acres planned, and there's only 680,000 of those acres in use today. And also there was discussion on the plans on refilling the Odessa aquifer. And that is my report for this week.
Thank you. Ben Franklin Workforce Development Executive Committee, and then Ben Franklin Operation and Maintenance, Columbia River Policy Advisory Group, which was telephonically, and yeah, that what Mr. Mullen, Commissioner Mullen has discussed was all included in that. Ben Franklin Transit General Manager interview. We interviewed one more candidate for that position. So with that, we'll move down to public comment. Anybody for public comment? Anybody on the phone, Keith?
No calls on the phone right now.
Good morning, gentlemen. I wanted to just kind of go over the redistricting timeline, but before I did, I just wanted to kind of reflect on what's happened in the last month and even in the last couple of years. And something that I have come to realize is that corruption comes softly to good men. And what do I mean by that? Is that good intentions, a lot of people have good intentions. And that is why process, especially in government, matters and why it is so vital. Because it keeps good men from fulfilling good intentions. Maybe for a friend, they want to help someone. They have a moral cause. The entire resist movement was good intentions, but it was corrupt. It allowed and it gave people permission to justify cheating on elections, on bureaucracies, ignoring the president's will. We saw in this last week a jury nullification in the Sussman case. Yes, what he did was wrong, but he was justified. He was morally justified, so therefore we find him not guilty. I see this in government all the time, and it's why, as a people, as a voter at large, we all have a responsibility to make sure processes are fulfilled. In fall of 2017, we were hearing rumors that there were maps being carried around by Commissioner Peck. And after Commissioner Didier had chose to run and had expressed his intentions in 2018 to run for commissioner, we heard that at the April 17th meeting, they were going to be voting on redistricting maps. So several of us came. I had to leave early. Brenda High came, Clint, Taylor Toronto, Matt Beaton, all spoke against redistricting in an election year when people were already setting up their campaigns. And in this meeting, Commissioner Peck brings up the Voters' Right Act that had just been passed previously. Then I look, it doesn't get passed, obviously, because it's an election year, and many voices opposed it, and Commissioner Cook and Commissioner Miller did not vote for that. Then I look in 219. I look tediously. I look through minutes, which I love to do research. I do indexing all the time for genealogy. And I see not one time. This is the year that redistricting should happen because it is not an election year. Yet not once is redistricting brought up. January 21st, 2020. I'm in Minnesota, so I'm not at this meeting, but I hear about it, so I go back and I look at the minutes. And that's when I first see on January 21st that Johnson speaks, Admin Johnson speaks about starting a public meeting. Cut me off when I'm at 3 minutes, by the way. January 28th, there was a public meeting on redistricting, and Mr. Johnson presents 2 maps. There ends up being set up on February 25th, a night meeting, because they need to give public notice. Okay, I got 1 more minute oh, I'm done, okay. So I will come back at the next. But actually, just quickly, I just want to say, at that time, I speak about the RCWs on redistricting on February 25th, and I talk about having a redistricting commission at that time. So.
Commissioners, later on in the agenda, the facilities acquisition for substance abuse center is going to be discussed. Before that discussion, I actually have a few statements and a few questions for you, and you do not have to answer back. Is our Benton Franklin County Recovery Center an equal partnership? Or are we just another unequal relationship between Benton and Franklin County Commissioners? A partnership where one county treats the other like the redheaded stepchild. Is history going to repeat itself when it comes to Benton and Franklin County's relationships? Where are we with selecting and appointing community members to the Recovery Center Board? An equal partnership is described as this. Each partner possesses an equal voice in management and an authority to act as an agent for the partnership. A description of community is this: a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristics in common, a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. After last week's events, certainly Benton County has done a great job not communicating with their alleged partners, Franklin County. When are our commissioners going to step up to the plate and say no more? When are you going to demand to be treated as an equal at the table when the words Benton and Franklin County is in the titles? Thank you.
Last week, I came to part of the meeting. I wasn't able to stay to all of it. I can't always stay for the whole meetings. But when the discussion of chief deputies came up, I later was able to listen to the meeting, and I heard the portion of that the coroner's chief deputy, when it was asked about it being an on-call position, and it was stated that it was not an on-call position. I just want to stand before you and let you know that that is an on-call position. We're not able to dictate when our jobs are called out. Our chief deputy is on call 24/7 at times, holidays, nights, and weekends. And I'm very proud to say that I have a good deputy that is willing to work those hours. You know, you sacrifice a lot of times your scheduling because of that. But that was just a misunderstanding, and I just wanted to come and let you commissioners know that that is a full-time on-call position. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for public comment? No one on the phone, Keith? Seeing none, we'll move on down to the next item on the agenda, which is the ordinance for 02-2022 flood damage prevention, repeal and replace, FCC 15.08. Derek.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is one of these things I debated consent agenda or to the board. Figured there may be some questions, so I just put it on the agenda. Effectively, what this is in 2020, right when the pandemic hit, we were contacted by Ecology regarding an update and a review that they had done on our ordinances associated with the floodplain damage prevention. So we had a meeting that, literally on March 19th, 2020. So it was the day, nobody knew what was going on. This got delayed a little bit until today. But the long and short is it brings our code into compliance with the regulations associated with the National Floodplain Insurance Program process and all that stuff, so that if a party develops and needs insurance in one of these areas, that process is lined out and articulated in our code for what they need to do. If they follow that process, they should be able to be insured. And it also informs us what we need to do as far as notification in different forms and applications that they may need to fill out. That said, most people don't build in those areas. It's something that doesn't come up here specifically, but it's just, so that's what this is about. 1508, how you have to construct your building if you are in a floodplain in order to get insurance, these types of details. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Questions, commissioners?
Derek, I appreciate you mentioning the distinction between items that go into consent and come on the agenda. And I also appreciate the fact that you err on the side of putting them on the agenda. I think this one was worth putting on there. It isn't always just what we know already or need to know, but it also puts it out to the public. There's a lot of people who see these who I'm sure are not aware that there are those kind of constraints for building in a flood zone. They probably find out when they come visit your office, but
Yeah.
it just benefits everybody to have the information in public. So thanks for putting it on the agenda. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
Were there any major changes that needed to be made?
Not really. It's things like I think I want to say off the top of my head. It's pretty standardized. Really, the biggest thing that occurred was a kind of a reformat of our sections, and then additional. There's some nominal requirements based on new technologies and things like that, options and various other things as far as what you can do with buildings. A lot of that, though, comes out of the actual building code, too. It's kind of a combination document. So nothing really too dramatic. Maybe, in some circumstances, it's really always situational based on the specific build that's being proposed, the use, and various other elements. So it's more of a guidance document. It doesn't get into really a lot of specifics as far as structural specificity. It's more about the process that needs to be followed and the different studies depending on where you are in relation to things, and then options as to, like, you can request, say you're right on the edge of a floodplain, and over the time, our maps are from the 1980 maps, the firm maps, flood insurance, forgetting what the R stands for. But it's the flood insurance maps that we get from FEMA. And they're in the process of digitizing, but they haven't gotten to ours yet, or at least the last I checked they hadn't. And so obviously in the last 40 years, some things have changed.
Sure.
So landowners have a right to petition to FEMA to have an on-site specific study done based on floodplain elevations and high water marks and various things. Then they get that certificate, and then they're basically declared, we don't need flood insurance because of this scenario. The actual maps are a little general. So sometimes it may show an area, but there may be a peak or something that lifts that specific plot out of that area. These types of things, and they can petition to FEMA to have that designated as removed from the floodplain. They don't have to get insurance because the odds of them flooding are pretty low, even though their next door neighbors may be because they're up higher.
Sure.
These types of things.
All right, thank you.
So, Derek, are we following the international building code, or is this our Washington State building code that we're following here?
On 1508,
Yep,
it's based on the building code, the international building code.
it is.
Now, there's Washington amendments, but this, like I said, 1508 is more around the processes followed and things like that, not the specific design criteria.
Yeah, because there is certain situations, like you've already covered, that there's a high rise on a piece of property that would not be in the floodplain, and if we're following specifically the international building code, they wouldn't know that. This is more of a local situation that we need to be paying attention to. And this is all based for insurance policies for those people that are building.
Right, it's state and national.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions for Derek on this?
No.
If none, I'd entertain a motion.
Make the motion for approval of FCC 15.08 as presented. I'm sorry, ordinance 02-2022.
Sorry about that.
That was ordinance 02-2022.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
second.
There's been a motion and a second. With no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 So at that point in time, we'll move down to the closed record hearing, ordinance 03-2022, zone change 2022-01. And with that, I'll open up the closed record hearing. Terry, please
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Chair. Yes, this is a zone change request for Richard Underwood, seeking to, well, we'll go in the order of the presentation. It's on parcel number 126-210-021, 126-210-022. It'll become apparent later, but basically, the original application was for the 019. They subsequently came in, did a short plat, and that's what created the two new parcels. The location is generally located south of the Columbia River Road, west of Fraser Drive, north of Self Landing Road, and east of the Columbia River. The comp plan designation is rural shoreline development. Current combined property size of both parcels is approximately 156.81 acres. It's currently zoned agricultural production 20, and the request is to change the current zoning from AP 20 to rural community 1. There's the subject site. Okay. That's Columbia River Road going along the east side, Columbia River to the west. My clickers doesn't appear to be.
Don't point that in your area.
I was shooting. This is a visual of what I was just talking about, how there's now two parcels there, whereas originally there was one. This is the surrounding zoning. The tan is RC1, the more gray tone is RC5, and then the white is AP20. So that gives you an idea of the surrounding zones. As mentioned, it's AP 20, properties, as just mentioned, zoned RC 5 to the north, actually those were to the south, RC 1 to the west and south over on that side, and then AP 20 primarily to the east. Minimum lot size is AP 20 is 20 acres, while the minimum lot size for the proposed zoning would be RC 1. And as this is consistent with the comprehensive plan designation of rural shoreline development, and a rezone will allow for more intensive use of the land upon any future subdivision or short platting. This is the comp plan language associated with the rural shoreline development. And basically, it's a mixture of large lots. Residential is the intent for the primary uses in that area. Some farming, of course, is also allowed, but under the comp plan, it is envisioned to be effectively developed fully as residential zones at this time. We received one public comment regarding concerns relating to river access. That type of question is really more addressed at the time of subdivision and the specific layout of the property. This is just for the right to propose with a potential subdivision, or whatever they want to do with it, but most likely that's why they would be going for the RC1 designation. Standard comment letter from the Department of Ecology, Public Works, and DOT. We don't tend to get a lot of comments on rezones. It's more at the time of subdivision that we'll get more specific comments from agencies. May 3rd, 2022 meeting, Planning Commission recommended the following findings of fact. Application to rezone approximately 156.81 acres of land to RC1 rural community is in accordance with goals and policies of the comp plan, as I just discussed. And it's supported by the comp plan and would be considered a proper implementation of the plan. Will not be materially detrimental. It's consistent with surrounding uses. Single family is the intended comp plan use of the area, and it's similar to other properties in proximity and adjoining. There's merit and value in the proposal. Conditions are required to be imposed in order to mitigate any significant adverse impacts, and a concomitant agreement between the county and the petitioner is not required. Suggested conditions of approval is that the future development of the site shall comply with county development regulations. It shall comply with local, state, and federal standards, and future development at the rezoned site shall be evaluated for the following, such that any new lots that may be created as a result, and access county road will require a access permit, approach, construction, minimum standards, et cetera. And then if any mitigation fees are required, they would be determined at the time of subdivision. And that's a recommended motion. Any questions?
Commissioners, questions?
I have no questions.
So Derek, I appreciate you referencing the one public comment about public access. I agree with your assessment that that is something that gets dealt with in the actual development of the land. Today's action is just recharacterizing the zone and what the possibilities are there. But I think it's important when people take the time to comment, especially when it comes to shoreline development, access to the river, that it gets in the notes and it gets addressed. So well done. Thanks for doing that. Overall, I think the package was complete. The area obviously is consistent for this rezone. Everything around it is. It's in our comp plan. So no objections, and nicely done. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, with no further comment, I will close the closed record hearing and entertain a motion.
Move for approval of ordinance 03-2022 zone change as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second to approve the zone change. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.
So with that, we'll move down to administration office business, economic development, .09 funds. Mr. Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, each year, we meet as a committee, including the port and the cities in Franklin County, to make recommendations to this board regarding the use of our .09 economic development funds. In 2020 and 2021, the city of Pasco received allocations from that fund for the purposes of design improvements and construction of the Pasco water reuse facility. I think you're well aware that that facility is critical infrastructure related to the development of that part of the county. And I know the city and the port both are working together to continue that development. The request that we have today is to reclassify the permission of those funds from design to construction phase. I noticed Dave Zabel is here. I'm sure he could respond more directly to questions if you have them. However, I think the background material is pretty clear on what we're requesting is to simply reauthorize those funds for the city of Pasco to be used for construction work. You're all well aware of the economic inflationary increases that are going on, the cost of construction, materials, those kinds of things are impacting major construction projects. But they were able to get additional funding for the development piece of it, or design piece of it. So this will just reallocate those .09 funds to construction. There is a resolution 2022-124 to be considered for making that possible. Thank you.
Commissioners, questions?
Yeah, I just, from the materials, we're really talking about the same project, but we're talking about different pieces of the project. For example, some of the earlier funds were for design. This is actually for construction. And to my way of thinking, although we separate design and construction and permitting and all the other stages of it, it all goes into the same bucket eventually for the same desired outcome. So I don't have any concerns or issues and support approval.
Move for approval of resolution 2022-124 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for approval of resolution 2022-124. Discussion. Keith, what's the total in our .09 fund right now?
The total available is about I think it's a little over $1 million. We just met as a committee last week, and you'll see those recommendations, I believe, next week for use of available funds.
So this will just about deplete our
Well,
.09 fund?
no, these were already approved, so this money's already been set aside.
This money has been set aside, and we
Yeah.
still have 1 point
A little
some
over
odd?
$1 million to allocate this year. Yeah, we get about $2 million a year in revenue.
From the .09 fund, which is a
Yes.
tax. And this facility is going to make out of sewer water, potable water, correct? What's the object here?
They kind of clean up the water and use it for agricultural irrigation primarily.
Okay.
And then recycle what they can back into the facilities that use it.
Is this facility located downtown here, or is this the
No,
one out on
this is-
Foster Wells?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, because this is where we've had the odor problem.
Which they have done a remarkable job of improving. But yes, that's what we're talking about.
And we are talking about the design, which has already been paid for, but this is the enlargement of
Yeah.
that facility.
Improved capacity, improving odor and other technical requirements of the facility.
Haven't had any complaints in a while, so they must be doing a good job. That was one of the biggest beefs I had with people, was the smell, the people that lived there and the valuation of their homes. They were concerned.
Yeah, it's improved dramatically since we've had those conversations.
Good deal. Okay, so there's been a motion and a
Mr.
second.
Chairman, comments?
Commissioner Peck.
So just to clarify a few things so that people don't misunderstand, the .09 is not a tax. The .09 is 9/10 of the 6.5% that the state of Washington takes off of our sales tax. So when you buy something for 8.7% sales tax, 6.5 of that automatically goes to the state. And if you are in what's categorized, there's certain definitions for counties that qualify, and we do, the state rebates back to us 9/10 out of that 6.5%, and that's where this money comes from. And it's been a real valuable economic development tool. And then just want to clarify on the water use, this is actually gray water, not sewer water, that's coming off of the food reprocessing plants in the King City area, predominantly Foster Wells. And this system allows that to be cleaned up enough that it can be put back onto farm fields and reused, as opposed to going into the city's sewer system, which costs everybody more money. So just a couple of minor clarifications, and I think it's a great project, and I do appreciate the design work that has taken away a lot of the odor. Thanks.
So, Commissioner Peck, your first clarification was that it was not a tax?
My clarification was that it is a return of
tax money.
of the taxes that
Yes,
the
okay,
state
thank you.
collects. They
That's-
collect
thank you.
6.5 off of our sales tax, and then they give 9/10 of that back to the people from whom they took it from in the first place.
So just want to clarify, it is a tax, just being reimbursed to us from the state. So thank you. Okay, so there's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. With that, we'll move down to the facility.
Actually, I have one more administration office business item. It's not on the agenda per se, but would ask the board's permission. We would like to schedule our next quarterly night meeting,
Oh, okay.
and I'm wondering if June 28th is an evening that would be available. Thank you, Dave. Available for the members of the board.
June 28th. It shouldn't be a problem for me. I got a 4 to 5 o'clock meeting. I can make this 7 o'clock, right?
We'll plan it at 7 p.m. Yes, sir.
I can make that work.
I can as well. Also, Keith, real quick, do we have any updates on the Wilson House?
Nothing has changed since we last talked. We have a lease extension coming before the board next Tuesday. We'll extend it for another 6 months, and I think we're close to a final plan with the treasurer's office to market that and get it sold this fall.
All right, thank you.
Is that everything, Keith?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll move down to the facility acquisition for Substance Abuse Center. And we're looking for Attorney Leland Kerr.
I don't see Mr. Kerr here. I do see Kyle Sullivan, who's been involved in those discussions. He might be able to shed some light on current events from his perspective.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan,
I know that
please.
there's others that may have input on this.
Please come forward to the hot seat.
Keith, before we proceed, did Mr. Kerr ask for this to be on the agenda?
He did not contact me personally. I was asked to add this to the agenda with his name on it.
Who
I
made that?
spoke with Leland Kerr, and
Oh, there he is.
thank you.
Mr.
Good morning,
Kerr.
Mr. Kerr. Welcome. We just got to the agenda item for facility acquisition.
Got there a little early. Thank you. Sorry about
No,
the
thank you.
delay.
Thank you for being here. welcome. So with that, we're just getting ready to discuss this facility acquisition for Substance Abuse Center. Please present, Mr. Kerr.
Well, I guess the main purpose for being here is just kind of bring you up to speed on where we've been. I think the first time we appear, we were in regards to making a presentation for the need for a recovery center in the Tri-Cities. We had presented you with a feasibility study that demonstrated that it is financially feasible. We began the quest then to determine if this appropriate facility. We've been negotiating for almost 2.5 years, either as a hospital district, whom I represent, or as Benton County, to acquire the Auburn Street facility that was owned by LifePoint, formerly known as the Kennewick General Hospital. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of ups and downs in that regard, but we came to an impasse about almost a month ago, where it became apparent that they were between Benton County and LifePoint, they were unable to reach agreement in regards to the terms of the sale. The purchase price was never an issue. It was the use issue that became the critical piece. So we kind of came to that conclusion. Very hard for me, because I felt very, very dedicated to that project, and I'm sure there's others that did as well, because it felt like a very, very natural fit. But it's not the only fit. And so I guess at this point we're indicating that I wanted to make sure that like I said, this is still a partnership effort. We still see, as the hospital district, a great interest in the project. Benton County is now taking the lead financially as well as developmentally. So we're here to basically support Benton County and Franklin County. As I made it clear in the past, this is a regional project. It has to be a regional project, which means that both counties have to be invested in the project and pursue it. So at this stage, like I said, I'm the bearer of bad news. Option A, which I thought was the best option, is no longer apparently on the table. The second option is to look for another location, and that is, I know it's ongoing. I made a couple of suggestions to Benton County. I know Benton County is investigating those, and our hope is that the enthusiasm from both counties and dedication from both counties to this project has not waned, that we still see that as an extremely important element for our community, and that the two counties, and specifically two county commissions, will still continue to support and explore that project. So I'm more here to answer any questions. Kyle is the man that knows more about the nuts and bolts and what has happened since our negotiations broke off. So he's probably in a better position to answer some of the very specific questions. But right now, I thought we had a shortcut to getting us to where we wanted to go. It didn't pan out. So like I said, we've got some. I think there's some other options that need to be pursued, but it cannot be abandoned.
Can you clarify what you meant by option A?
Option A was the Auburn campus,
The KGH facility,
the old KGH facility.
to
Correct.
be purchased by Benton County,
Correct.
and with services within to be operated by, to be determined?
Actually, yes.
Okay.
To
All
be
right.
determined.
All right, that's good enough. Yeah, thank you. So Kyle, I guess we'll just jump right in. Like everybody, I've heard 100 different rumors. I've had a little bit of input from people I think are in the know, but my last understanding was that LifePoint, which owns the old KGH building, which had previously been, I'm told, unwilling to sell it to the county or counties without limitations on its use. Then subsequent to that, agreed that they would sell it to Benton County, and there wouldn't be any limitations on its use. And then most recently, what I've heard is that LifePoint is not willing to sell it to Benton and/or Franklin County without the limitations on its use. And one of the key sticking points for limitations on its use appears to be length of time for inpatient treatment for adults in the mental health and substance use disorder arena. So before I move to my second question, do I have that piece right, pretty much?
You do. Initially, there were a couple of pages of restrictions, and some of them were just, we couldn't do it. We couldn't run the facility with those.
Right.
Had them whittled down to essentially one, and it was the length of stay, and they were not willing to allow for anybody to stay in the facility that has for treatment for mental illness. They were okay with the substance use part, but they weren't allowing anyone to stay at the facility for longer than 3 days.
Okay, so that's different than what I heard. What I heard was that stage two, that second iteration, was that there were no limitations. And that period lasted only a matter of days before it was then discovered that, no, there would be these limitations. So rather than spend a lot of time on the history, where we are today is Life Point's willing to sell it to the county or counties, but there are restrictions on its use. I've spoken with counterparts in Benton County, other commissioners. It appears to me that they're not intent on pursuing that facility with the limitations and are looking at another facility. So could you speak to, one, whether or not they're still looking to purchase the KGH building possibly for some other use? And two, are they looking at a different facility for the mental health substance use treatment?
Yeah, and the beauty of the old KGH building is it was big enough to do everything that we needed to do. They've not put restrictions on SUD services to be provided out of there, or any behavioral health, which will include substance abuse and mental health treatment for youth.
Do you have any sense of why there's restrictions on mental health treatment there?
I think they're concerned about competition for their facility,
Okay.
for the behavioral services. I think, our hope was that we could sit down in a room with them and have a conversation about it. And we probably made, I would guess, no less than 10 requests, formal requests, to sit down and talk about it, and they never responded to any of that. It ended up being referred to their attorney, who contacted an attorney for Benton County, and the restrictive covenant that they wanted to put on the property is for 99 years. So these conditions would be binding forever.
They is Life
Life
Point,
Point.
the seller, okay.
Yeah.
Which we should all remind is a private entity.
Correct.
So they obviously have the right to put restrictions if they wish.
Correct. And so the concern, quite frankly, became, we can't have a facility that, we don't know what our populations will be 15, 20 years from now. We could have 600,000 people between the two counties. And the ability to not keep someone with a mental illness in the facility longer than 3 days is a deal breaker, quite frankly. And so, again, I think the price of the property and the potential for the property is there's still value there. And so Benton County is considering purchasing the property with no specific designation as to what services would be provided. Maybe housing, residential housing. We could do residential SUD treatment there, but the crux of the services that we're looking for in the recovery center, those front end, when someone's in crisis, will not be able to be provided there. And so there are several other properties that have been considered in the process of kind of looking at them, seeing what would work best, but there's not been a decision yet made on any of that.
You made a reference earlier to the importance of co-locating substance use disorder treatment for co-occurring disorders with mental health conditions. I've not heard anything official from Benton County either to know what their intended use might be for the KGH building, but I have heard some reference to possible facility for juvenile services of some kind. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, one of the services, quite frankly, that's lacking statewide is adolescent inpatient treatment. I know there have been other facilities. There's currently, well, as of last month,
And I'm sorry, treatment for
adolescents, for under the age of 18.
that's the who. I'm asking about the what. For substance use disorder, for mental health care?
Mental health care.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there's a term CLIP, it's Children's Long-Term Inpatient Treatment. About a month ago, I had a discussion with people over GCBH, and they had indicated that statewide there was a 90-bed or a 90 person weight limit throughout the state. There are other facilities that offered the emergent adolescent mental health care, but also had some of those beds as clip beds. And so that was one of the services that you had probably heard discussed there. I think ultimately the hope is that when the advisory panels are formed, that those will help guide what services our community needs and what services would be provided. But I know that's a gap in not only regionally, but statewide.
So then to summarize, to your knowledge, the KGH building is off the table for use for the initially intended combined services of adult mental health and adult substance use disorder treatment all in one co-located place.
Correct.
And I've heard some suggestion that Benton County is looking at or has maybe identified another facility for those combined services. Can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, there's, I know that there were some representatives that went and toured I think it's a completed geriatric. Its original intended use was to be a geriatric psych unit. It's a brand new building. For whatever reason, the contractor backed out, and so it's sitting open. I know that building was looked at. There's essentially a warehouse that was used to be Welch's grape juice, and right now there's big cylinder containers in there that store juice. So it's essentially a warehouse that could be.
Is that the same building that's being converted into like a marketplace?
It is. It's next to that.
It's next to
It's
that.
the same owner. So that's been toured. There was talk about touring the old. I think it was can't remember if it was Albertsons in Richland off of Lee. I don't believe that's happened yet. So there are facilities that are being looked at. Of course, zoning is a big issue. Making sure that we don't run into issues with neighborhoods and.
Yeah, as a human services director serving both counties, is it your opinion that the restrictions placed on the KGH building by LifePoint make it unsatisfactory, unusable for the intended co-located mental health, substance use disorder services?
Yes. My biggest concern with the restrictions is in situations and just as a kind of a background, when there isn't a psych bed available, a decision can't be made whether or not to commit somebody based off of bed availability. And so previously we would be in a situation if you couldn't find a psych bed, they would be detained to a medical facility, which is not an appropriate place. It's called a single bed certification. And the counties, prior to your terms on the commission, the Benton and Franklin counties used to operate the crisis unit. And so one of my functions when the counties operated the crisis unit was when we had single bed certifications, we had, there were times because there's a limit to their stay, and there were times that there would not be a bed available during that limited time, so we would have to hold court in the medical hospital to extend that stay, and there were times that people were there for several weeks, and the hope with this facility would be to avoid having to essentially warehouse people in a medical facility. They'd be receiving psych treatment, but the 3-day limit is just simply not something that we can work around.
So you said the hope with this facility. When you say this facility, you're talking about our hope with the KGH that's off the table, or with the new?
With the recovery center, with
any recovery center,
center,
regardless where. Okay.
Yeah, I think ultimately the goal isn't to treat people long term at the facility. It's you get them in, identify what the crisis is. If they can be stabilized in a short time frame, then great. If they need longer term care, then they be transferred to Lourdes or a psych hospital that has an available bed. But bed availability is an issue. The last year the counties operated the crisis unit. For the year we had about 350, 360 involuntary detentions. Of those, 176 of them started as single bed certifications. So it's a big issue, and we don't want, it's not an appropriate place for these people to be treated in a medical facility. They need to be able to receive appropriate psychiatric care.
Sheriff Raymond made a couple of observations, and I know I've been speaking a lot, so I'll make this quick. And the concern about who's in charge, who's responsible, who owns the facility, those are all legitimate questions. They don't have to be things that we shy away from. But I want to give a real quick history, and you're actually the perfect person to discuss this with, because you lived through it with me, which was a decade or so ago. We had a situation where we had two counties that each had equal vote in all matters related to bi-county programs. Benton had 3, we had 3, and in our combined programs, an issue arose where Franklin County wanted an equal vote on policy matters, on budgetary financial matters. Even though most of these programs are funded individually to each of the counties from the state, there is some local money involved sometimes, and you know what they are, so I don't need to go there. But that issue of having equal vote between the two, there came a point where Benton County expressed in public meetings, so I'm not, telling stories on anybody, that because they had more than twice as many people and they brought more than twice as much money to the table as Franklin County did, even though a lot of it came from the state, that they should have essentially 2/3 of the vote on all these matters. And I expressed concern that we are elected legislative executive bodies from the two counties, and we have obligations to our individual counties for spending their funds. And we can't have another county with 2/3 of the vote making decisions that impact taxation and spending and budgets and programs on Franklin County citizens when Franklin County citizens never had the opportunity to vote another county's commissioners in or out, and vice versa. It works both ways. And so the discussions led to an arrangement. We said, well, maybe it makes more sense, rather than having two counties spending money on brick and mortar facilities, to have the counties build a facility together, or have one county build a facility, and then the other can act as a client customer. And the key to this whole discussion is that I think that model can work just fine, but the critical component is the contract in writing between the client customer county and the county that owns the facility. And that's today how we're operating human services. And it has been, to my knowledge, seamless and worked beautifully. But the best thing that I like about it is that because it's working under a contract, if a point comes where the client county is not satisfied with the services of the other county, doesn't want to participate any longer, we're free to walk away. And we don't have to spend our citizens' tax dollars on brick and mortar buildings. So there are pros and cons, and I'm sure people would argue it both ways. But I thought, because I think we're headed into a discussion about who's in control and who owns what, that having that historical perspective and why we went away from that 50-50 based on the vote power was necessary. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
So with the 3-day bed limit, was there any discussion on possibly extending that if there were no beds available at their let's just call it their competition?
Yeah, and like I said, I think reasonable people can come up with reasonable solutions. Was what our goal was in trying to sit down with them and have a discussion about it, but they simply would not meet. Like I said, multiple requests from my level to county administration to the commissioner level. And they never, quite frankly, it was never a no, it was never a respond back. The response we got back was contact from the attorney, LifePoint's attorney in Tennessee, to work with Benton County's attorney on the conditions. And what was indicated is simply that the 3-day limit was non-negotiable. And the attorney from LifePoint indicated to Benton County's attorney that he understood what we were trying to do, but he was taking his marching orders, and it was not something that they were willing to even have a discussion about.
Okay. How many beds are going to be needed for a facility to handle what the issues we have facing here?
Yeah, and a lot of that I think will be helpful when the advisory committees come together to discuss what all services we need. I think initially, you know, how I would kind of envision the recovery center is that there's a drop-off point for law enforcement, for family, for somebody that can simply walk in to receive treatment. And then you have the ability to assess what their needs are. If they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, maybe they can go to a secure withdrawal management unit. They can, you know, if it's more of a mental health issue, that can be treated at this facility. And let's hypothetically say that if someone's on is detoxing from substances, you know, at the end of that detox, there would be the opportunity to seek out residential treatment. Though that's not what I would consider an emergency service, though, and so that would be something, like I said, that could be at a different facility, but you would have these specific crisis services under one roof. There is to be able to access Medicaid funding, there's a 16 bed limit. Now you can have multiple 16 bed units at a facility as long as there's specific designation at the facility that they don't have shared staff, those kinds of things. But I think originally, you know, probably 2 or 3 of the 16 bed units at this facility, but depending on other services added, you know, if there's a clip placement, if there's a residential SUD, you know, I don't know. I think again, I think once the advisory panels are formed and those discussions, I think you know, I think there will be guidance on what services would be recommended to be at the facility.
So while you're looking at these other locations, is there any plan to do a juvenile crisis response center anywhere, or?
In terms of, again, I think there's talk about clip placement. I think are you talking, the conversation about inpatient youth services is certainly has been discussed. Again, I think that's something that the advisory panels can work towards making recommendations on.
All right, thank you.
So Kyle, how do you differentiate somebody that's been on drugs, that's no longer on drugs, but it's long affected their brain? Do we call that a mental health issue then, or do we call that a drug addiction issue?
Well, again, I think that's probably why the state's moving more towards behavioral health. It's an all-encompassing, you know, treat the symptoms and you know, not worry as much about the cause of it, but you know, unless there are medical reasons to, but you treat the client as they present, and it's because quite frankly, a person can be under the influence of methamphetamines and their symptoms are similar to maybe someone who's simply diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Right. My point exactly. So with that in mind, how can we be restricted to these patients at this facility? If they have that type of situation, how can they be labeled as a mental health, and therefore we're limited for the amount of people when we clearly see that this is a drug-induced situation?
Yeah, and I think if I'm following the question correctly.
Yeah, because we're talking about mental health. We're limited to mental health, right? The amount of people we can have in this facility.
Specifically at the crisis stabilization unit. Again, for a secure withdrawal management, for detox unit, there were no restrictions put on that.
Okay, so their detox is over, but their brain's been affected forever. Are they then mental health and we will only have so many of them?
You know, and again, I think that's part of the reason with the 3-day concern is we can't have restrictions on how long we can keep keep somebody. You know, it'll be a clinical decision from the operator of the facility, whoever's providing the services, as to,
Okay.
you know, when they come in, they'll do an evaluation and make a determination on which path to take with regard to services.
Are we going to be able to see the contract between Benton County Commissioners and LifePoint?
I think it would be a purchase agreement. I don't know that it would be
We're going to be affected by it.
yeah,
Our funds are involved too.
Well, right now, I think Benton County has funding to purchase the property. I don't know that there's been any, and maybe I've not been involved in that conversation. Perhaps there has been with regard to having Franklin County dollars contributing.
My understanding is Benton County is buying the building 100%. There's no Franklin County money in the
No,
purchase of the building.
but our money will be involved in the operation and
Yeah,
maintenance.
yeah, and LifePoint won't be necessarily be, I mean, I guess they could put in a bid to operate the facility, and definitely, for services, I believe that you would, definitely need to be have the opportunity to see the contract.
And I guess if we feel like Franklin County's not getting a fair say in this, then we have all the intention, we could remove ourselves and put our own facility in.
Yeah, I think, yes, you could. The short answer is yes. Again, I
But
think.
very expensive.
It would be expensive, and again, I think when we start talking about our community, you know, the
Yeah.
clients that receive these services, they don't care if they're
I know.
on one side of the river or the other. They're needed services, and so I think for everyone, you know, so what happens if you have a Franklin County resident that ends up in Benton County, and Franklin County's got their own services, do law enforcement have to drive that person across the bridge? I think it complicates things, and I think this is our community, whether it's a Benton or Franklin County resident with regard to these services. If we combine resources, we have a better opportunity to provide a higher level of service.
And I agree, but we got to be able to communicate. That's the key, is communication. And I think we need to hear from LifePoint to see if everything we're hearing is the way it is, because I've heard differently, that it's not cut and dried the way it's been presented to us today. So I would like to hear from LifePoint, if we could schedule an appointment with LifePoint, one of the representatives, to see if this is the way it is, or if we're not being told the whole story. I want to know every detail of this, and how can we call it a crisis center if we're not going to be able to handle the crisis of our neighborhood, our community? That's what this is all about.
Well, you can, you know, we've not had luck communicating with LifePoint. Again, requests were made to sit down and have a conversation about it. I can tell you straight up, I'm being 100% truthful and honest with you about how the process has played out. So that's how it's played out. But I encourage you to reach out to LifePoint.
It may be worth considering a bi-county meeting between the two boards on just this subject and have this kind of discussion. I've been working with Benton County Commissioners for years. I found that sometimes you get around a table and a lot of the stuff gets cleared up. But I think what I relayed earlier is I'm hearing that from multiple sources now, so I'm pretty confident that that's what's happened. But I'm totally open to having that conversation. Bi-county meeting might be a good way to do it.
Okay.
It'd be good to encourage and invite LifePoint too, so they could present, so we can hear it from the person that owns the building that's selling it, and what the restrictions they're putting on us, because I want to know what the restrictions are. They may have their own crisis center that they want to make sure that they keep it full, but when it overspills, how are we going to deal with those people?
Well, and it's you know, it's interesting. It's all of the psych hospitals, they're private entities, and so what you often find is they'll say, well, I'm licensed for 22 beds or 32 beds, but there are instances where, because of staffing concerns or acuity, maybe they got violent clients, they'll cap the number. So that's to say that we've got 20 psych beds is not real accurate all the time. There have been times when the facility's been capped at 5 clients or 8 clients. And there's not, and so they can, you know, and this is across the state. Any of these facilities can refuse admission.
So why couldn't we have that spillage into this crisis center?
That's what the hope is.
Okay.
Again, the facilities that we toured down in
I think we need to
Arizona.
get everybody at the table so we can get this ironed out, because right now, we're all working through you, Kyle, and you're trying to do the best you can, and right now, we need to get this thing ironed out. We gotta get moving on this, because it isn't going away. And what that state trooper told me is that they're busting them in from Seattle. We're gonna have an overabundance of problems. If we don't get going on this, we're gonna be behind the times. So I appreciate everything you're doing, but we need to get all the players at the table, and we gotta iron this out.
May I address 2 of the issues that you raised? First of all, in regards to the terms and conditions of the purchase and sale agreement, the critical document is a restrictive covenant that goes along with it. That document will be recorded to be enforceable, so it'll be a public record, so it'll be available for inspection.
Okay.
The second thing is the discussions with LifePoint. Our final discussions were somewhat complicated by the fact that our local representative, John Solheim, had a medical emergency and has been out of office, or had been out of his office for almost 3 months. And he's not envisioned to come back and probably for another month. He would probably be the best person to be able to report, but he likewise has been somewhat out of the loop. It's very difficult to deal with a multi-headed organization such as LifePoint. Our discussions have always been that, matter of fact, we had a golden opportunity with the opening of the facility of the new addition to Southridge, because we had their regional VP here. And I was hoping to be able to use that as an opportunity. So they have expressed an interest to discuss, but I'm concerned at this stage that their interest to discuss is really associated with selling the hospital for some other purpose than a crisis response. But I think the invitation would be a good one. I'm hate to see that being misconstrued as far as they're being misconstrued as being a lack of interest or cooperation. It's just they got too many chiefs that are involved in this project that they're in.
Keith, do you think you might be able to try to arrange that with bi-county meeting with all the people?
We can certainly make that invitation. My only caution, and it's because I haven't thought through this, is making sure that we honor the agreement that we made with Benton County when we last met on this, for them to take the lead on property acquisition. I think at the time, everybody was anticipating that KGH was the property that they were going to acquire, but since that seems to be in question, I think this board ought to, as just an advice from me, that you ought to be careful about making sure we're not interfering in that contractual negotiation and honoring our commitment there. However, having said that, I'm happy to work with my counterparts and arrange a bi-county commissioner meeting.
Reach out to the administrator and tell him what we had the discussion of, and see how receptive they are to it. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Being here. So next on the agenda is the sealed document review. And I got a question as to how this all transpired from our last meeting to the release of this document. What was the chain of events that got?
My understanding was that the seal that took place was, really this is probably something for the PA's office to address, but that it was ordered by the court to be sealed at the time it was put out. But I also understand that it had since been made public that it was, once the investigation of the Dennis Houston matter was concluded, the information that was contained in that document, or that report, had been released. This was before I was here, so I don't have any personal knowledge of that, but I understand that the prosecuting attorney's office made a request of the court to unseal it. The court granted that unsealing, and the prosecuting attorney's office then requested to put it out there, since we were getting public records requests and inquiries from the public about seeing a copy of that report. And so it was published on our website, I believe last Wednesday. I'm not sure the exact date, but after the court had ruled that it was a public document and was not subject to seal.
Well, I got an email from Sean at 4:23 p.m. on 5/31. and it was released the next day and in the newspaper. So I've researched and went back and looked at these 2012 articles, and it says here the report then was addressed in private session with the county commissioners, but was not shared with anybody else. Miss Taylor, that worked for the PA's office, told the court that Tuesday, it is the county's position that the only way the county would waive privilege on this is via a vote of county commissioners acting in the official capacity in the boardroom. So if that's the case, I'm curious to how this got released.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, I could address that if you'd like.
Please.
Yeah, so going back to 2012, first, it was a little bit of a challenge to try to identify what document was being referred to. It was only at the board meeting, I believe, 2 weeks ago, there was a reference to Janet Taylor. And so Janet Taylor was serving in the capacity as a civil DPA at the time, and she was not involved in any way with the criminal prosecution. A lot of this stemmed from the criminal charges in the case, and this report was deemed to be something that was required to be disclosed to the defendant and to the defense attorney, and that probably happened after Ms. Taylor's representations to the Board of Commissioners. Once that document was shared with the defense counsel of Mr. Houston, as well as with the defendant, because the last thing we wanted was to have some reference to a document that was not shared with the defense, serving as a basis to possibly exonerate the charges or somehow give him a break on the criminal prosecution. So we, in having to comply with providing full discovery to the defendant and the defendant's attorney, had to share that document with the attorney. We took the additional step to make sure that the document was shared from public release because there was still being analysis done on the civil side to determine whether or not other county officials might have been involved with the case. That time has passed, and because this document was already released to defense counsel, somebody outside of the Board of Commissioners, that is no longer a privileged document. Further, when it was filed with the court and there was a request of the board to make sure that, hey, if there is a sealed document, we need to release it. Well, once we triggered opening up the sealed document from the court, we did that petition at the last Tuesday criminal docket. The court granted that request, triggering, at that point, it's now a public record. Anybody could go to the clerk's office, make that request. Because we have that document currently in our possession and we had pending public records requests pending, including public records requests from the Herald, as well as inquiries from many members of the public, that was a document of interest and subject to public release. There was no longer any kind of privilege attached to that document because it was already now a public document since it was requested to go forward and get that document released from the court. So consistent with what the commissioner shared at the meeting previously was that, hey, the public has a right to know, and I agreed with that. Our office made the request of the court to consider the fact that this has been almost 10 years. Typically, when we make a request to seal a record, it has to be for a limited period of time. It cannot be some indefinite period of time. And because it was a matter of significant public interest, involving probably the largest embezzlement, I think, in our state's history, that also triggered the need for no longer holding on to this as a sealed document. So we basically went forward consistent with the direction from the board to unseal this document. Again, this isn't our control, it's the court's control. We made that request of the court last Tuesday. The court granted that request, and once that did so, that is a public document accessible for anyone who requests it. So this was done to expedite addressing the issue of several requests. Once a document like this hits one media source, several media will start bombarding the office in the county for multiple requests. And what we've done in the past is simply put on topics or documents of public interest, high public interest, we've made them readily available on our website. We did the same thing back in 2015 with an officer-involved shooting case where we were receiving multiple, if not, hundreds of requests for the records on that case. We found it was the simplest form. You simply put it on the website so that anybody that wants it could access it. It was also our understanding that the Tri-Cities Herald back in 2012 had published this same document earlier. How they got that, I have no idea, but they apparently did obtain a copy of it, and they published it approximately 10 years ago. So at this point in time, this was no different document than what had already been previously released 10 years ago, but because of the recent interest by members of the public, this was a matter certainly of public interest, and because of the passage of time and the clearance of all named employees at the time had been reviewed and considered, there was no longer any kind of basis to ask the court or fight against release of that.
Thank you, Sean.
So,
Thank you.
anyway,
Thank
hopefully
you,
that
Sean.
clarifies. You bet.
Thank you. So, last meeting, I stated, Sean, is there a report on fraud from Public Works that was sealed? You said there is nothing that was sealed. Did you just forget about this report?
Actually, yes. This was 10 years ago.
The
and I
biggest
did-
fraud in the state, and you forgot about it. Okay, well,
Well-
I guess I can give you that.
Well,
In this
Commissioner,
report, Sean, in,
Can I answer the question?
absolutely.
The question. Okay.
You
So-
said you forgot about it.
Well, when I was asked of the report, I was given the description that this was a report authored by Janet Taylor, and I was not aware of any report that Janet Taylor had offered that she authored that was sealed. That never happened. This was a report that was generated by an outside entity from Franklin County. I don't recall having something, as you recall, I made a record saying that usually when we seal things, it's for search warrants and other things like that, but usually once charges are filed, that triggers an unsealing. I did not realize that this record was still under seal. I didn't believe there would be any documents still under seal. And because we were never given a accurate request for a record for the document, it was not until the reference to Janet Taylor that triggered the records request and review from our office to where we found that report in an email that was sent to the commissioners from Janet Taylor. So I did not recall that because, one, there was no record generated by Janet Taylor that was ever sealed, and this was an outside document, and usually there's always language included with most items to release those documents over a certain period of time. And I certainly would have thought that with the passage of 10 years, those parameters would have been met and it would have been triggered an automatic release. Once we reviewed that record, once we were able to further investigate and find out what record was possibly referenced, additional information was provided to our county administrator referencing this as a 9-page document. And we were able to locate a 9-page document that was part of the criminal file. And so that assisted us in identifying what we believed to be the record that everybody had been talking about, and that triggered its release for the public. So hopefully that clarifies.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So last week during the meeting, I specifically asked that the commissioners review this before it's released, and I believe I heard Commissioner Mullen agree with me. Did you, Commissioner Mullen, agree with looking at this before it was released?
Yes, I thought we should have a look at it to make sure we weren't releasing anything that was critically damaging to the county. So-
Did you hear that last week, Commissioner, or Sean? Did you hear the commissioners request that?
Again, the issue is that once this document was unsealed with the court, it's a public record at that point, and there's no restrictions on a public record at that point.
Okay.
And you were provided a copy of that
Yes.
almost contemporaneously to be able to review that as well.
I did review it, and I had a phone call before I reviewed it, and the constituent from our county said, "What am I supposed to be looking for in this document?" And I said, "What document?" And she said, "Well, this sealed document." And I said, "Well, how'd you get a hold of it?" And she goes, "It's on your website." So I said, "I don't know what you're supposed to be looking for. All I asked is to review it." And she said, and she works for the EMTs out there, "This is an incredible report that puts up many red flags, And as I read through it, I could see this is a learning experience for every department in this courthouse. And for them to be deprived of this report and everything that was in it is an injustice, because this is how you catch fraud. And they went through here and they went through everything from the books he was using and the QuickBooks that he had to tally the report at the end of the year by hand. This is what needs to be learned by every department in our county and every county across the state, so this never happens again, Sean.
Well,
And so this is,
Actually, this 9-page report was a very abbreviated report that was not even near the hundreds of documents that the police investigation ensued. The police investigation file has been a public record for almost 10 years now. Once the criminal charges were filed, the entire police record is subject to public record. That has been released, and that contains a lot more details than this 9-page report that was done just for the purposes of evaluating whether or not any other managers were aware of Mr. Houston's history.
well, if
So
I'm,
this report was a very limited report. The details that you just made reference to are contained in great detail in the law enforcement investigative records, which have been public record for the past 10 years. And I believe most of the media outlets have all picked up on that and published all of that information previously 10 years ago.
there is a lot of good information in here, and I encourage everybody that's listening today to please request this and read it, because there is an incredible amount of information in here that needs to be reviewed by everyone.
Well, no one needs to request it, and that's the beauty of being able to put it on.
No, it's on our website.
It's ready to access. And
Please go and review it.
Yeah.
So with that, is there any other business for the good of the county? Oh, public comment. Thank you very much for the, I got so involved in the discussion. Is there anybody for public comment?
Mr. Chairman, before that, I apologize, but I've got a personal matter I need to attend to, so I'm.
I heard
be
Keith.
excused. Thank you.
Lori Hales, Unit 202, Block 15, Franklin County. I heard the presentation, and I had to quickly Google LifePoint. On their webpage, the second paragraph, LifePoint Health is a forward-thinking company focused on exploring and implementing cutting-edge ideas, partnerships, and technologies that meet needs, drive growth, and advance our mission of, and this is capitalized, making communities healthier.
Wow.
From what I just heard, that is a bold-face, not truth. We have already established we are well below the state average for available services. So there should be plenty of customers to go around. It appears that the current presentation that LifePoint is attempting to hold back our communities for their own financial gain. I have something to say to LifePoint. We will succeed. Greed always loses.
And that's why I've asked them to come and to present. I want to hear it from them.
I appreciate Lori very much. Yeah, I think I was speaking with the coroner, you know, in marketing, you understand that restaurants all conglomerate together, shopping centers, because they feed each other. They actually help generate even more business. LifePoint is a fool. But the people have a great deal of influence, and I really, I'm willing to write letters if other people are willing to write letters to LifePoint. You know, I guess to them, people living on the streets dying are better than them losing a few dollars. So back up the redistricting thing. I have, I think, 10 different times I commented trying to get the redistricting commission to happen. The reason why I first dawned on me to do that was when I was looking up the RCWs, and the RCW states that you cannot redistrict in an election year after January 16th and until after Election Day in November. And so then I was doing further research, and it was talking about redistricting commission. I know that some counties are larger, and so it's required by law. And then some counties, it's not required, and that the state legislature also has laws. And I got to looking at all the commissions that we have on our commissioners page, Planning Commission, Veterans Commission, I mean, I think there was like 20 of them, yet no redistricting commission. And I thought, why? Why does Franklin County not have it? And so that's why I spoke about it at that February 28th. And then Rocky Mullen, who was getting ready to run for office himself, also brings up on March 10th a possibility of a redistricting commission. Going down to all the way to March 24th, and COVID shuts the county down. But in this, at that February 25th, I am told by Commissioner Peck, he says it to the room, that our county has never done a redistricting commission. They should never do one. Our county doesn't do it. It's silly. We shouldn't do it. And then in the March 24th, of course, COVID hits. Also, Commissioner Peck had stated, you know, we're going to get sued, we're going to get sued, we're going to get sued. We have to do this now. We have to do this right now. Even though it was illegal to do at that point, the only way it could be done is by a court order at that point. Redistricting delay happens, and they realize after COVID hits that they're going to have to wait for we're going to have to wait for the 2020 census to come out. By the way, the RCW also states you cannot redistrict in a pending census year without a court order. So then on July 14th, 2020, again, I speak about the redistricting commission. Going forward into March 16th, I call in about a redistricting commission. Keith said he didn't know of any counties that have done that. Peck said no counties in the state do that. Luckily, there was another visiting commissioner here, and he said every county does a redistricting commission. To go forward, I know I'm out of time. The point that I'm making is that during the redistricting commission, another thing I was asking for was demographics. I had several people tell me that Commissioner Peck was mocking me as I was speaking. That's real nice. But I just want to point out that I understand it was the redistricting commission that actually saved this county millions. So the point is, process matters, and I love your little smirk, Commissioner Peck.
Public comment? Anybody else?
Good morning, Angie Manarola. I would encourage the Benton County Commissioners, and I will be emailing them. I understand their frustration with the holdup and wanting to move forward, but I think the KGH building continues to be the best choice for the Crisis Recovery Center. And if LifePoint is insisting on the 3 and nothing past 3 days, then maybe they could make a negotiation where after 3 days the people are taken over to LifePoint 2 in Richland that already has the inpatient unit. And if they don't have beds, then our new Crisis Recovery Center is able to keep them. Or they could also do a sunset clause where after, say, 10 years, we are able to build an adult longer-term inpatient. So this isn't specifically to LifePoint. I just am speaking for the community when I say there are so many entities that talk about they want to help mental health people, they want to help people suffering from SUD, and yet the financial and political games that keep happening and then the result is people suffer, and we're tired of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to recap a couple things for you, commissioners. About 4 or 5 years ago, the concept of a recovery center in Benton and Franklin counties was born. All kinds of community players came around the table, and all those community players, to include LifePoint, which in reality is Trios and Lords, were sitting at those tables, and the vision took place at that time to have a recovery center with secure bed space, unsecure bed space, an ER trauma type of center, all the community partners involved. You name it, it was a vision, and that's still what it is today. And as we have progressed along, what's happening is we have one county, 3 men, and frankly, you three too, that are deciding what it is the community wants. And I'm gonna encourage you to, let's stand up the boards that should have been stood up by now, so we can start discussing and working through these problems to come up with an answer. We're all going to have differing opinions, but at the end of the day, the Tri-Cities, the Bi-County region, needs a recovery center that has a board that's run by the community. And it becomes then the commissioner's responsibilities to make those things happen based on what that community and that board wants. We've got the cart before the horse, and I actually I am offended that a commissioner from either side of the river is going out and just trying to broker a deal for the KGH building. That there's been a lot of long step processes with it, and just for the sake of spending the tax dollar, because they're gonna have to give it back. And always remember, with what you're hearing here, it's not always the truth. There's more to it than meets the eye. And I believe if we put our communities in charge, we're gonna have a successful relationship, and we're gonna have a great recovery center, wherever it is or however it is. And I'm asking of you all to stand up and ensure that that happens. Thank you.
I know that we don't have the administrator. Is there anybody on the phone?
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. 2 comments, one of them on the unsealing of this document. I think it's an unfortunate chain of events that have led us to today, and the explanation of why we didn't know about this sealed document. And for the, I quote, largest fraud case in government in the state of Washington's history. I don't know the process. I'm not an attorney, but by the description, it appears that there's so many sealed documents that you forget about them. And when you have the largest fraud case in the state history, for that to be forgotten, I find fascinating and unfortunate. And that we forgot that there was a document that was sealed and that we forgot that it existed, I think is highly unfortunate. Thankful that it's been revealed. I just spent the last 15 minutes looking for it on the county's website unsuccessfully, so I'll have to continue to look for it. And so I'll leave that to rest for now. Second thing is I want to echo what our sheriff said. I've been watching this process and pretty engaged and involved in watching what's happening in our community, and I agree with him. We need to stand up these boards or these committees that are made up of community members and start engaging the community to make this successful. And pretty engaged and watch the process pretty closely and carefully, and would encourage you to reach out as you said that you would, and reach out to LifePoint and ask to sit down with them and ask to have a conversation with them about it, and get the whole story. And I've found that sitting down at the table and having a discussion, that a lot of times that misunderstandings or or whatever the case might be can come to light, and I would encourage you to do that. Thank you very much.
I just want to respond. I actually looked it up on the website this morning, and the document is on the county's website for everyone to read. And I would encourage everyone to read it and make your own decisions on maybe possibly why it was sealed.
How did you find it on the website?
On the front page, under public notice, the very front page of the website, public notice.
So if you didn't hear that, it's on the front page under public notice is how you can get that document and review it. Is there anybody on the phone? Is there any other public comment? And I apologize for overlooking the public comment. That's who we need to hear from, so.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple of comments on this document since
Commissioner
my
Peck.
fellow commissioner did here. I think it's important for people to realize that the Board of Commissioners don't have the authority to seal this, any document, and we didn't seal this document. It was sealed by the court to protect the interests of the defendant in this case and to ensure that the defendant's attorney had access to all the information that we have. I think in legal terms, they call that discovery. So I can understand why it was sealed. Like my fellow commissioners, last week's meeting, I had no knowledge of it. Not that it would matter one way or another, but I frankly couldn't remember a document having been sealed in this matter either. I think probably because it didn't involve the board. It was actually done by the courts and through the prosecutor's office. Whether you think that's normal or not, I guess really doesn't matter, but I think it's important for people to understand that it's protecting the defendant's rights, reducing the chance of an appeal, and supporting due process. The second thing I'd say is that this review, investigation, report, whatever you want to call it, was done by a retired human resources person, and it is one person, not from this county, going around talking to various people and getting their versions of what they believe, what they think they remember, what they don't remember, and then writing it down, and then putting it forward in a document where it then gets further interpreted by whomever is reading it today. If this were in court, it would be called hearsay, and the entire thing probably wouldn't be admissible because there's no firsthand. So I, too, think it's fascinating reading, and I'd encourage people to read it if they have an interest. But I would also encourage them to remember that this is one person's recollection given to another person and now passed on to you 10 years ago. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen, you good with adjournment?
Well, I'm just, of course, you can't believe everything you read in a newspaper.
Which newspaper are we talking about?
Just about any.
Or in a hearsay document.
So it's just, reading some of the articles from 10 years ago, it basically says, at least that's what the article was, I guess it's their hearsay, and I'll just leave it at that, but you can go back and look at the paper on Tri-City Herald, November 14th, 2012, and read their article, and I guess make your own conclusions from that, and then read the actual document that's on the county's website. Thank you.
And I would just add to that, that I'm glad the document is finally released because there are a lot of red flags. As that person in the blocks that called me and is present today has stated, that this is a learning experience for every department, even the the emergency personnel and the ambulance drivers, the fires, all their funds they need to keep account for. And I think this is a learning experience for every department in the county. Everyone should read. So with that, with no further discussion, this meeting is adjourned.